Tulsi Gabbard is now officially leaving the Democratic Party. She tweeted the following: "I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that is now under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by cowardly wokeness who divide us by racializing every issue and stoke anti-white racism, actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms, So we'll come back. I'll play this video, but she did a whole tweet thread here where she talks about it. Now, I have to say, this is the least surprising thing of all time. In fact, I thought maybe this had already officially happened. Apparently it didn't. But I pounded the gavel in my mind when this clip came out. So this is from November 12th, 2021. Tulsi went on Tucker's show, and she made this criticism of Build Back Better. Quote, "Our government is too powerful." Oops, sorry guys. "Our government is too powerful and too big, even as it is, and this bill is only going to make matters worse." So, in the past, Tulsi had criticized Democrats and the Democratic Party oftentimes from a left perspective. So she would say, hey, you guys aren't going far enough on issue X, Y, and Z. And when she made those criticisms, I would often agree with her. And I liked her a lot at the time. But then as time has gone by, she stopped making criticisms from the left of the Democrats and oftentimes made criticisms from the right of the Democrats. And this is a great example of it here. So, I mean, this is just a flat-out right-wing criticism. The idea that big government bad, and that's why Build Back Better is bad. Well, what was in the original Build Back Better? Child tax benefit, universal pre-K, paid family leave and medical leave, tuition-free community college, lower prescription drug costs, a Medicare expansion that included dental, hearing, and vision, housing, home care, major climate money, immigration, lower Medicare age, Obamacare expansion, and then it also had stuff like taxing the rich, taxing corporations, fees on polluters. So these are all things that Tulsi, at one time or another, has supported. And then when she went on Fox News and she said, this bill is bad because big government bad, I mean, that's like if the New Deal came out and it's the 1930s and Tulsi's like, well, big government is bad, so I don't like this New Deal stuff. That's a right-wing criticism. That's not a left-wing criticism. So I thought maybe she already had officially left the Democratic Party. She didn't, but now she's making it official. By the way, from the same interview, in November of 2021, there was this infamous clip that came out, which also told everybody, pound the gavel, the Tulsi that exists now is not the Tulsi that, Bernie supporters had liked earlier on.
You don't sound like a Democrat to me. I hereby, you can raise your right hand, you're definitely a conservative. So, anyway.
Always a pleasure, Sean.
We always...
See, laughing, saying, always a pleasure, Sean. If that's something that you take issue with, that is not how you react. You go, well, no, I mean, okay, kind of funny, but no, I'm not a conservative, Sean. But she didn't say that, because over time, she has changed. She has moved right. She went from attacking the Democrats from their left to attacking the Democrats from their right. And that's where she's remained. So now, having said that, let's go back to the original video. We'll watch it and we'll react here. And let's see what reason she gives.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers.
Okay, hold on. So are the Republicans. And in fact, the Republican Party is worse on that front. There are many warmongers in the Democratic Party, yes. They are unquestionably worse under the Republican Party. Joe Biden, his foreign policy has been way better than Donald Trump's foreign policy. Joe Biden has nearly eliminated drone strikes. And that is not something he gets credit for. Joe Biden is currently trying to normalize relations with Venezuela. Now, granted, it's for oil, and it's because we're kind of breaking up with Saudi Arabia, but he's still trying to normalize relations with Venezuela, and that's a good thing. Joe Biden is currently negotiating to try to get back in the Iran deal. That's a good thing. He should have already been back in it, but at least he's trying to get back in it. Trump ripped that up. Joe Biden actually got the boots on the ground out of Afghanistan. And by the way, nobody gave him credit, even at the time when the media was shitting on him relentlessly. I was one of the only voices out there saying, he's right. He's right to do this. Now, he's since made that worse because he's sanctioned Afghanistan, he stole their own money from them, and so now people are starving in the country. So that's damning with faint praise, of course. But at least he got the boots on the ground out. Trump didn't do that. He said he would do it, he didn't do it. Trump said he'd get us out of Iraq, he didn't do it. Trump increased drone strikes 432%. Trump randomly assassinated General Soleimani, which nearly sparked a war with Iran. That's a violation of international law. He wasn't allowed to do that. Trump tried to do a coup in Venezuela and said, Juan Guaido, I'm going to recognize him as their president, even though he's not their president. So, the Republicans are worse. Trump had John Bolton in his administration. A blood-soaked war criminal was leading his foreign policy. Mike Pompeo, another neocon war criminal, was involved with his administration. Gina Haspel, a torturer, was in his administration. Trump signed a pro-torture executive order. So, you can't just make this, the Democratic Party, it's a group of warmongering elites. You have to either also say that about the Republicans, but really, if you're being honest, you would acknowledge the Republicans are even worse on this front. See, what else we got?
We're driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racial...
Okay, hold on. Did she attack warmongers and wokeness in the same breath? Like, was that part of the same criticism?
Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness.
Okay, wait. So the warmongers are driven by cowardly wokeness? Like, I'm trying to understand why these two things are connected to each other. Why would you put a criticism of warmongers and wokeness in the same argument? I mean, I understand if you try to make two separate arguments. One is like, I don't like the warmongers, and then another argument is, I don't like the wokeness. But it seems like she, like, smushed them together, right? She smushed them together, is a hard word to say. I don't know why. Why would she do that?
Control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness.
Yeah, it sounds like she's saying the warmongers are driven by cowardly wokeness, which I literally don't understand. How does that make any sense? What does that mean? How are the warmongers driven by wokeness? But let's be kind here and say, for argument's sake, she's making two separate criticisms. One of them is the warmonger thing. Okay, well, we just dissected that and broke that one down. The other one is, okay, I'm against the wokeness. Well, it depends. What do you mean by wokeness, right? Like, what exactly is your criticism? Because if you say, Tulsi, I'm against censorship and deplatforming and things of that nature, then I say, I totally agree with that criticism. Totally agree with that criticism. But if you're saying, like, I'm against wokeness in the sense that, like, what, you can never mention anything about race, that's a different criticism, and I wouldn't agree with that. Like, is it quote-unquote woke if you say, hey, look at the numbers for mass incarceration, it seems to be disproportionately targeted at people of color, would you say, oh, that's wokeness, and that's dividing people by race, and I don't like that? Because then I wouldn't agree with the criticism. So it depends what you mean, right? But that's the problem, is whenever anybody talks about wokeness, they really don't define their terms, and so you don't really know what they're saying. And now, that term is used as, like, the catch-all for everything bad. You know? So, I'm against wokeness. Okay, but what does that mean? What exactly are you criticizing? And then if you get specific, maybe I'll agree with you or maybe I won't, but at least we'll know what you're saying. But now there's, like, it's not clear what people are saying even when they bring it up.
Who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism. Who actively work to...
Okay, I don't... The anti-white racism thing, I really struggle to get my mind around. How? What anti-white racism? Can you maybe point out a couple fringe examples of certain things that happened where you could say, yeah, okay, that's anti-white racism? Maybe. Maybe you can. Maybe you can find some stories like that. But does that connect to a broader societal issue of a scourge of anti-white racism that's, like, sweeping the country? I don't think so, man. I really don't think so. And by the way, you can't in the same breath say, I'm against identity politics, but also, hey, there's a lot of anti-white racism out there, because then you're doing white identity politics. Which is it? Do you want to be egalitarian? Do you want to be colorblind? Do you want to not play identity politics? Or are you going to bring up an identity-based concern and issue? Because if you're bringing up, anti-white racism is such a big problem, you're doing identity politics. You're just doing white identity politics.
Undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution. who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality.
Okay, what? How are Democrats hostile to people of faith and spirituality? Most Democrats are people of faith. Most Democrats are religious or spiritual. I mean, I'm guessing this is like a nod to like the religious liberty types, right? Where they claim their religious rights are being discriminated against, but really they're not. They're just mad that they can no longer do authoritarianism or theocratic policies and force others to abide by their religion. I genuinely don't know what she means by this criticism. I'm going to run it back a second, listen again. Jesus, we haven't got through half the video and I have to stop like every sentence.
Who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution.
How are Democrats trying to undermine the freedom in the Constitution, the freedoms in the Constitution? I would agree that in some ways both the Democrats and Republicans have done that. For example, with NSA spying, you know, they all supported the Patriot Act, illegal NSA spying. But what other freedoms? The Eighth Amendment, yes, because the Republicans have pushed torture and implemented torture, and Democrats have oftentimes sort of tepidly allowed it to continue, right? So that's another one. But outside of those, what freedoms are Democrats coming for? I mean, it seems like it's an allusion to like maybe the Second Amendment, oh, they're coming to get your guns. But even the strictest Democratic proposals on gun regulation are like, hey, let's get rid of the assault weapons and the high-capacity magazines, which would still leave rifles, shotguns, and handguns. So it's just a mild regulation on the Second Amendment. And it's not even violating the Second Amendment. So is that what she's referring to? Is she referring to, Democrats are coming for your freedom of speech? Because I got news for you. We just covered the story. Donald Trump is suing CNN for $475 million because they said mean things about him. So who's against the First Amendment? This is a guy who said we should punish flag burning with up to a year in prison. So who's against the First Amendment? It would be Trump. It would be many on the right. Now, there are many woke lefties who love to censor people on college campuses, and I condemn that, and that's bad, and they shouldn't do that. But let's not pretend like, you know, the Democrats are passing bills in Congress like the Ban Comedy 2022 Act or some shit. That's not a thing.
Who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans.
Oh, my God. Demonize the police thing. Okay, what percentage of Democrats support defund the police? It is absolutely a minority position, number one. Number two, how many elected Democrats ran on defund the police? You could literally count them on one hand. Okay? So this is a straw man. You take a fringe and you define everybody like that. Take the fringe and say, no, they're all like that. But also, you're not even this isn't even fair to the people who believe in defund the police. Because if you talk to them, they'll tell you, what I mean by defund the police is a lot less inflammatory than you think it is. I just want to cut the budget 30% or 50% and put it towards like social services. So, you know, mental health professionals show up if somebody's having a meltdown as opposed to a guy with a gun who might end up killing them. That's what they mean. So, like, engage honestly with these ideas. But she's not doing it. She's just, like, smugly strawmanning here.
To people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans.
By the way, I don't know, what does protect criminals mean? Are you talking about how, like, Joe Biden just did the super based thing of pardoning all federal weed offenders? Is that what you're talking about? The thing that's going to help tens of thousands of people be able to get a fucking job now? Is that what you mean by protect criminals? I genuinely don't know. What do you mean?
Believe in open borders, who weaponize the...
Open borders! Okay, I'm going to ask the same thing. Do a poll. What percentage of Democrats support open borders? It's going to be absolutely going to be a minority. What number of, how many elected officials in the Democratic Party say, I support open borders? I don't know if you'll be able to find one. Maybe you could find one. Maybe you could find 5 or fewer. But again, this is a straw man. And then every time you look up the record of these people, that Tulsi is referring to, it's always somebody like Obama who had the nickname deporter-in-chief because he deported millions of people. Or it's somebody like Biden who, Biden kept in place Title 42, which sped up deportations during the pandemic. Kept in place Remain in Mexico, which was a Trump-era policy. These people are... A fair criticism of many Democrats would be that they're too right-wing on the border. But no, she goes with they support open borders. That's just not true, Tulsi. That's just not true. And if there were Democrats who did, I would disagree with them. I would say, yeah, I don't agree with that. What I'm in favor of is let's have borders, but let's have reasonable humanitarian rules in place where the process is fair for people to get in. Right? And oftentimes, some Democrats will look at refugees and say, oh, they deserve due process. And people on the right will turn around and say, you just believe in open borders. And it's like, no, I believe in international law, and I believe in human rights. And if they have a right to seek asylum, right? And so you can't just say that's open borders, because it's not. So again, this is just like a smug right-wing bubble criticism. It's not a fair criticism.
National security state to go after their political opponents. And above all...
Okay. Jesus, Tulsi, you're really hitting us over the head today with the bangers. Did she just take an underhanded shot at the intelligence agencies for specifically going after Donald Trump? Did she act like that's like a witch hunt or something? Let me hear that again.
Americans who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all...
Okay, come on, man. Come on, man. Tulsi, Trump has committed, dozens of crimes. This is, one of the few based things the intelligence agencies have done. Yeah, the FBI has done terrible things, and they've gone after civil rights leaders, and I condemn that, and that's bad. You know what else they did? They went after the KKK, and they went after the mafia. And it was good when they went after the KKK, and it was good when they went after the mafia, but it was bad when they went after civil rights leaders. Is this nuance so hard to grasp? In the case of Donald Trump, he took not only classified documents, not only top secret documents, it was like the top secret of the top secret. It was like nuclear-related information. It was stuff that's so private that you're only allowed to see it in a room called a SCIF, which is like a secure room, and it's locked up from within that secure room. This is the stuff that he took. And this is the guy who, by the way, when he was president, he was selling foreign policy decisions to Sheldon Adelson. Sheldon Adelson gave a Republican PAC $1 million donation, and Trump allowed Sheldon Adelson to determine we're going to move the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. This is a guy who, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, took $2 billion from the Saudis. He's taken tens of millions of dollars from the Saudis to have their shitty golf tournaments at his course. He's got these sketchy-ass business deals, and he has all of this classified and top-secret information. And so they're going after him saying, you can't have this stuff. You can't have it. And so it's legitimate, it's fair, and this is on top of all the other crimes. All the financial crimes in New York, the business fraud, the tax fraud, the insurance fraud, all the stuff that went on in Georgia with the fake electors and effectively trying to steal the election. And you're mad that the FBI and the intelligence agencies are going after him? They should have gone after him sooner. Unbelievable, man. And by the way, in her longer video on this, she attacks Democrats for not believing in the rule of law, as she is defending Donald Trump from investigations into him. Unbelievable. Who doesn't believe in rule of law again?
All who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling...
Unbelievable criticism. As if the Republicans are not for the powerful elite? The Democrats are for them, but to a much lesser degree than the Republicans. It's so weird to release this now, right after Joe Biden reduces student loan debt, right after Joe Biden pardons federal weed criminals. Right after Joe Biden does a 15% corporate minimum tax rate, which is something Trump never would have done. Trump would never raise taxes on corporations. He cut taxes for corporations. He cut taxes for the wealthy. Why would you release this now, when we're currently onshoring jobs under the Biden administration? Why would you release this now, when Tulsi claims she's a big environmentalist? Well, it was the Democrats and Joe Biden that just slipped a provision into the Inflation Reduction Act that allows Congress, allows the EPA to regulate carbon emissions. When the Supreme Court had just struck down the ability of the Environmental Protection Agency to protect the environment. They said you can't regulate carbon emissions because, there wasn't an act of Congress that specifically said you could do that, so we're going to block you, the EPA, from regulating carbon emissions. That was a nightmare scenario. And the Democrats slipped into the Inflation Reduction Act, a reversal on that, where now we can regulate carbon emissions because now it's defined as a pollutant. None of these things would have happened under Donald Trump. None of these things would have happened under a Republican. Biden has been way better than I ever thought he would be. Ever. And now, every time we come on here, we're not, okay, here's a win here, here's a win there, here's a win here. Little as they may be, but they are wins nonetheless. And now is when you choose to announce, like, oh yeah, I'm done with the Democrats. What a strange time, man.
On my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
Wow. It's funny because I would consider myself exactly that, a common sense, independent-minded Democrat, and using that common sense and that independent mind, I can tell you about the small but very real victories that have been happening recently and how this is way better than I expected and way better than any Republican administration. And it's not even close. So, man, quite a moment to run with this. Quite a moment to release this. But she's launching her new podcast. And, she's carved a lane for herself. This is a little niche. Maybe she'll eventually get a more full-time Fox News gig. Maybe she's angling for some sort of position in Republican politics, maybe VP slot or something. Could be. You never know, right? But this is just the cherry on top, because really, we knew when she started making right-wing arguments against Build Back Better in this, and giggling it up with Sean Hannity, and hosting Tucker's show, the writing was already on the wall. And these are not, again, the most important point is, these are not left-wing criticisms of the Democrats, saying, oh, the Democrats are too far right-wing. That's not what this is. That's not what this is at all. Now, most of her criticisms are from the right. That's what they are. And so, this is definitely the logical endpoint, And by the way, Dave Rubin was giving her credit as soon as this came out. Like, oh yeah, she finally did it, bro. She took the red pill, bro. But, oftentimes what happens with stuff like this, though, is sometimes people will lose interest now because there's always something a little different about, oh, you're the person who calls yourself a lefty or calls yourself a liberal or who is a registered Democrat, but you attack the Democrats all the time. That's useful. We like that because then people on the right could say, oh, even this Democrat agrees with us. Even this lefty agrees with everything we say. But now when you officially, say, okay, I've left the left as Dave Rubin did, or, I'm leaving the Democratic Party as Tulsi did, oftentimes it's like your utility to many of them sort of goes away. So, we'll see if the same thing happens with Tulsi. I don't know. But this is, she's reached her final form, let's say. That's pretty clear.